Morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for spending some time with me today to learn about how you can grow your business with Sage Alerts and Workflow. And just to lay out how we're going to proceed today, I'm going to start out talking about the business value of a technology like Sage Alerts and Workflow. We're going to talk about how an organization can increase your human capital and grow your business. We'll talk about that for about 20 or so minutes. Then we will jump into a quick list of the 10 most common uses of Sage Alerts and Workflow with businesses today. And following that, we'll wrap things up with a quick demonstration of the live Sage Alerts and Workflow technology. As Jesse mentioned, if you do have any questions as we're going through today's presentation, please do type them into the chat box in the GoToWebinar session, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of this presentation. So without further ado, let's get right into our subject matter. So when we talk about what are the forces that drive the success of an organization, we can actually identify two specifically. One, the software applications that you're using to drive and automate your business, both software and hardware. And secondly, it's the people within your organization, your employees, or as they're officially termed, your human capital. Now, when we take a look at those two engines, what we quickly determine is that the use of automation is to run your day-to-day business. Your employees who are using that automation, however, their focus is on growing your business. And that's what we're going to focus on for today's discussion. So, human capital. The more human capital an organization has, the more people, the more person hours that you have, the more you can grow your business. But there are certain limitations there. If you're working in a traditional environment, each employee has a maximum of about 8 hours a day that they can contribute to the running and growth of your organization. Now, these folks who are in the front office or back office parts of your organization, you know what they do. They spend time processing orders, collections, ordering items, shipping product, and so on. So when we look at folks who are spending the majority of their time in either the front office or back office, the question that we need to ask is, how do you get more value out of your existing human capital and thus increase your organization's opportunity for growth? Now, perhaps the easy answer is, well, let's just hire more people. Unfortunately, most organizations don't have the luxury of just bringing on more people to hope to grow their business. So what we're going to talk is the process whereby you can identify those tasks currently done manually by your employees, by your staff, that can be and should be automated through software, because it's by automating these tasks that you increase your human capital and thus you gain the ability to grow your business. So now we need to go back to those groups of people who spend their time in front office or back office activities and analyze how they spend their time. And again, we can divide that into two different areas. The first is your staff processes a lot of data. Again, you're acknowledging orders, you're delivering invoices, statements, purchase orders, etc. You're communicating with your supply chain, with your vendors. You're moving data from one application or system to another. So when we talk about these processing tasks, we can look at examples like generating and delivering order confirmations, reordering stock, generating and delivering invoices, statements, sending notifications about contracts that are about to expire, processing purchase orders, reviewing orders for errors or missing parts, and the like. Now, all of these are tasks that for many organizations today are done either wholly or in great part manually. And let's just dive into one of these processes. Sending out notices to delinquent customers. Ideally, none of us want to have customers who are late payers, but the truth is, we all have them. So let me ask you a few questions. Whose job is it within your organization to run and review the reports that identify past due clients? Once you find who those clients are, whose job is it to reach out to the client, notify perhaps whose job is it to regenerate and deliver the corresponding paperwork, the client's invoice, or a copy of their statement? Whose job is it to look over the client's entire AR picture to find out, is it just one invoice that's overdue, or are there multiple invoices? And then whose job is it to put a client on credit hold or change their payment terms so that additional invoices don't become delinquent? Well, if you answer one or more of those questions with, well, that's one of my staff's job, or perhaps even, yeah, that's me who does that, then we're going to suggest that you automate these tasks and thus increase critically needed human capital, employee time. So let's now focus on the second area in which employees tend to spend a lot of their time. And unlike processing data, here we're going to talk about the time that staff spends analyzing data. So you analyze data to look for anomalies, to look for exceptions, to identify trends, etc. And why do you do this? Well, because the last thing you or any of your colleagues want to say in your daily business activities is, if only we had known. That's that exception management, identifying anomalies. We don't like surprises in business. So what kind of analysis do organizations do today? Well, certainly analyzing for not just overdue invoices, stock shortages, shipping delays, contracts coming up for renewal or that have expired, changes to a customer's credit limit or credit status, customers who have changed their buying habits, goods coming in as damaged. These are just some examples of the analyses and reports that an organization have to run and review and take action in response to. So again, let's just consider one of these examples. If you keep inventory, you know that you need to keep watch over that inventory. You need to know when an item not only has dropped below its reorder level, or perhaps within 5 or 10% of its reorder point. So again, we ask the questions. Whose job is it to watch over inventory levels? Who has to run that stock status report and look at it and use their yellow highlighter pen to identify just those few items that need to be reordered? And who does that reordering? Who approves the reorder? Who keeps track of that order once it's been placed to make sure that the corresponding items are received in a timely fashion? Again, if it's you, if it's one of your colleagues, start to think about the amount of time that analysis takes out of your everyday. Even if it's 5 or 10 minutes every day, that doesn't sound like much. But when you add that up and 5 or 10 minutes times the number of employees who are doing this analysis, and again, multiply that out by the week, by the month, by the year, there's a lot of time spent manually performing analysis and figuring out what actions need to get taken in response to exceptions and anomalies that occur. And our recommendation here is that you automate these analytical tasks. And so the way that can be done is through a technology like Sage Alerts and Workflow. What is it that Alerts and Workflow does? Well, it really does 5 things. But the key to each of these is that they all begin with the word auto. Alerts and Workflow automatically monitors your business conditions. It automatically notifies the appropriate people, automatically delivering the appropriate documents to the right people, automatically triggering the appropriate research, and automatically updating your business applications. Now, if we put this graphically, what it looks like is this. Alerts and Workflow starts out with monitoring your Sage ERP application, and for that matter, all of your other business applications as well. When important transactions or conditions occur, Alerts and Workflow notify the appropriate people. It automatically generates and delivers the appropriate forms and documents, automatically triggering the appropriate analytics, whether that's a Crystal report, a Sage Intelligence report, or some other analytical tool. And finally, Alerts and Workflow goes back into your business applications and updates the appropriate information as needed. After all, you know, if a client is severely past due, you know you want to put them on credit hold or change their terms. If an item has dropped to within 5% of its reorder level and there are no pending purchase orders for that item, you want to automatically place a purchase order for that item. So you've heard me use a couple of scenarios just in these initial 10 or so minutes. Let me now give you and share with you, based upon over 1,000 clients' responses to our surveys, the top 10 most common uses of Sage Alerts and Workflow. And as I show these 10 top uses to you, consider this. If just one or two of those scenarios would be of use to you, by using Alerts and Workflow to automate those processes, you've completely paid for your investment in the Alerts and Workflow technology. Now let's go through what these top 10 uses are. Certainly monitoring stock for shortages. I mentioned it earlier. You know, if you're not able to fulfill an order, perhaps you lose that order. So being able to keep on top of inventory levels. If you happen to be using Sage's Inventory Advisor product as well, Alerts and Workflow works with it as well to combine its analyses to automatically notify the appropriate people and place the corresponding purchase orders. Shipping delays. You know, I was with a client actually a couple of weeks ago, earlier this year, and they said to me, Don, you know, our customers don't mind it when occasionally we're late delivering something to them. What they do mind is us not telling them when we're going to be late. And I think that's a great lesson. You know, stuff happens in business life, and usually customers are accepting of that stuff, but what they're not accepting of is not being told about that stuff, like shipping delays when they occur. The sales process. Think about the number of steps in the sales process, from generating and delivering a quote to a customer, to following up on that quote, to placing the order, sending an order acknowledgement to a customer, following up on that order, making sure that the order gets processed in a timely fashion, gets shipped with a shipping acknowledgement, and maybe even a follow-up after the product is shipped, making sure that the customer is happy with that shipment, sending them a copy of their invoice and their statement. There are so many steps that are currently done manually in the sales process that can and should be automated. And here we're showing an example of an order confirmation being automatically delivered by Alerts and Workflow to the corresponding customer. Of course, once a customer buys, they should pay. We've already said they don't always do so on a timely basis. So automatically regenerating and redelivering past due invoices to customers, a very popular use of Alerts and Workflow, but also just notifying internal staff, such as the account manager responsible for that client or your CFO, about invoices that are severely past due. We talked about monitoring inventory levels when inventory drops to its reorder point or within 5 or 10% of the reorder point. But how about if you have time-sensitive stock that needs to be sold before it gets written off, knowing about lots with an expired date? So really looking at stock on both sides, stock that's running low and stock that needs to be sold before it's written off, a good use of Alerts and Workflow. Leveraging client buying habits. You know, every organization that I've ever visited talks to me about wanting to do trend analysis, but actually few organizations have the time and resources to do it because it is a time-consuming process, if not automated. I walked into a client's conference room to find a table strewn with monthly reports and comparing sales figures from one month to the next to see if a client is buying a lot more or a lot less than they used to. How about automating that process? If you want to know about clients whose sales have increased or decreased by more than 10, 15, or 20% versus the client's last month's sales or their average month sales, Alerts and Workflow, can automate that process. If you're doing jobs for your customers, you need to know when a job is running behind time, is looking like it's going to exceed its budget, because the wrong time to know about a budget exceeded is when all of that budget has been used up. Being able to be notified and take action when a job is less than 50% complete but has used up more than 60, 70, or 80% of its budget, that's the time, those early notifications to do something about those jobs. Purchase order processing. This, to me, is one of the top uses of alerts and workflow because almost every organization deals with purchase orders that have to be not only created, but based upon a dollar value, they have to be routed through one or more people for their review and approval. And it's all too often that a purchase order sits on someone's desk just waiting for them to get to it, but it's typically under a stack of papers. And so it just sits and sits there. Using alerts and workflow to expedite that PO process is a critical use of this technology. And how about just using alerts and workflow to look for errors, to look for missing data, bad data? In this particular example that you're looking at now is actually an example of a designed alert from alerts and workflow that tells people about items that look to be duplicates in inventory. In this particular case, a duplicate being defined as an inventory item that has the same description but different item numbers. And you can define within alerts and workflow what your duplication consists of. Is it the same item number? Is it the same description? Or is it other factors? And then last but certainly not least with alerts and workflow is its ability to tell you when a critical piece of information has changed. When you're using a Sage ERP application, you need to know when a customer's credit limit or credit status has changed. You need to know when an item's price or cost or lead time has changed. Every single field in your Sage ERP application, as well as in any other applications you might be using, can be automatically monitored by alerts and workflow to detect if and when a field's value has changed. And in this particular case, we're actually looking once again at a designed alert message within alerts and workflow. We'll look at this live in just a few seconds. Here telling us about an item, a part in inventory that has had its cost changed. And note that alerts and workflow here is not only telling you that an item has had its cost changed, but it's telling you what it changed from and to. All right. So let's take a look now at the alerts and workflow technology itself. So let me jump out of this PowerPoint and let's shrink this window down and let's go into the Sage Alerts and Workflow portal. All right. It's going to start out by asking us to log in. Let me do so. And as we're logging in, let me make a couple of comments about the alerts and workflow technology. Number one, it's a server-based application. I love to use the analogy of a smoke detector for your business data, because alerts and workflow is not an application that you or your colleagues are going into on a daily basis. No, it's typically installed. It's configured to watch over what you consider to be your critical business conditions and activities in Sage 100, Sage 300, or elsewhere. You then tell alerts and workflow what it needs to do, how it needs to respond to those conditions if and when they occur, and then you turn alerts and workflow on. It runs as a Windows service. So again, think of that smoke detector analogy. You tell it what smoke signals to look for, and then you turn it on and you walk away from it. And perhaps the best statistic that I can share with you about alerts and workflow is this. It's installed in over 12,000 organizations worldwide. Our support staff, and we do all frontline support on the product, we receive fewer than 8 incoming support requests a day. And the reason for that is that this is a set it and forget it technology. And I just want to spend a moment to talk about that. It's a very important point because today you need to really carefully consider bringing on any new technology, any new software application into your organization, because you need to think about the folks you need to train on it and their use of that technology and how that's going to take time away from their other duties. Alerts and workflow is different. It's not an application that folks are using on a daily basis. It's set up, it's turned on, and it just sits there as a watcher, looking for those conditions and activities that are important to your organization and automatically responding. In some cases, sending alerts to your staff, maybe sending an invoice to a customer who's past due, generating a purchase order and delivering that to a corresponding vendor. Okay, a couple more technical details about alerts and workflow. I've mentioned that it certainly works with Sage ERP applications, but it also works with all of your other business applications, whether they're from Sage, from other vendors, whether they are hosted applications or applications that reside on-prem within your own organization. So alerts and workflow can monitor all of your business applications. It can also monitor the content of incoming email. It can also go up and monitor the activity of websites. So it really is a global monitoring and response technology. Alerts and Workflow stores its data in a Microsoft SQL Server environment, and Alerts and Workflow runs under all Windows-based operating systems. However, its UI, its user interface, as you can see here, is purely that of a web browser. Everything is browser-based. Everything is done within this one window that you see here. So let's take a look at an event, and let's drill down into Sage 100, and we'll look at accounts receivables. Now, as we bring up some of these pre-configured events, I do want to mention that Alerts and Workflow comes with, at no additional cost, pre-configured collections of events, as we call them, for all Sage applications, as well as for a number of non-Sage applications. In fact, there are roughly 85 to 90 event packs, as we call them, pre-configured collections of events, such as the one we're looking at now for Sage 100. Those are all free to you. And in fact, the Sage 100 event pack, which is what we're looking at now, comes with roughly 90 pre-configured events. The event pack for Sage 300 comes with about 65 events. The one for Sage HRMS comes with about 50 events, and I can continue, but I'll stop here for now. So let's choose an event. We've been talking a little bit about following up with customers whose invoices are either coming due or are past due. So let's take a look at an event that identifies and responds to invoices that are overdue for payment. So as you'd imagine, everything in the application is based upon permissions and authorization. So only folks whom you choose, that you give access to create, to update, to view events will have access to it. So let's take a look at this particular event. Now, every event workflow consists of, and to make life easy, we list those 5 components. We highlight them on the left-hand side of the Event Designer window, starting with a description of the event. This event is looking for invoices that are overdue for payment. And I just want to point out one item over on the right-hand side. Repeat notification. In some cases, with one order that's been received of over a certain dollar value, more than $10, $20, or $30,000, you only need to notify a person a new, really big order. However, if we consider a condition like this one, invoices that are overdue for payment, and we're monitoring for these conditions every day at 9 o'clock in the morning, well, when this event ran this morning at 9 a.m. and sent out its alerts, hopefully some of those customers paid, but if they didn't, tomorrow at 9 in the morning when the event runs again, I'm telling Alerts and Workflow to repeat these notifications. So Alerts and Workflow can continue or alert someone or deliver a document until the condition has been addressed. As I like to put it, sometimes you need to poke someone in the back, and you need to poke them again and again and again until they actually respond to the condition that occurs. I mentioned that this event is running every day at 9 o'clock in the morning. That is, in fact, one of the schedules that ships with Alerts and Workflow. Some events are very time sensitive, such as monitoring inventory levels. You might need to monitor those more frequently, every hour, every few minutes, or even continuously. And then there's some events, for example, identifying a customer who has not purchased within 30 days. Well, That you probably only need to monitor for once a month, maybe the last day of the month or the first day of the month, looking at last month's transactions. And by the way, you'll notice that we've really thought this through in terms of monitoring. For example, if your staff works only Mondays through Fridays, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., well, we probably should be sending these alerts only during work days. You have the ability to indicate what are work days and work hours for your organization. If no one's going to be at their desk or near their device on which they receive an alert, like their mobile phone for a text message, then there's no reason to send out the alert at that time. You can even indicate what dates are holidays for your organization. Again, making sure that the right information reaches the right people at the right time. So let's move on to the third component of an event, referred to as an event's trigger. What are the conditions that this particular event is looking for? Here we're looking for all invoices that have an overdue balance in excess of X dollars. Now, one of the things I like about alerts and workflow is that I can design this one query, and we'll have a closer look at it in just a minute, but I can actually reuse this one query in multiple events. Because in this event's case, I'm looking at a threshold of $100. Someone else might want to only look at those invoices with an overdue balance of greater than $500 or $1,000. So again, based upon permissions, you have the ability to specify what that triggering threshold is. But let's take a closer look at this query for just a moment. Folks often ask me about designing a query, and do they have to be a programmer? Are they writing SQL syntax or some other code in order to create or modify these queries? And the answer to those questions is no, you're not writing any kind of code. You don't have to be a programmer, because everything here in the query designer is specified in plain English. And in fact, since alerts and workflow comes with these vast collections of pre-configured events and queries, you can actually use these pre-configured queries and events, use them, modify them, copy and paste them to your heart's content. Now, I've decided to jump over to the filters tab for this event because I want to see exactly what conditions this query is looking for. And here we can see we're looking for any open invoices where the balance is greater than a certain dollar amount and the invoice due date is less than the current date, indicating that the invoice is past due. Everything here, as you'd imagine, is available in plain English format, so all of your conditions that you can choose from. Now, I happen to know that in my Sage 100 database, my customers are very diligent. I don't actually have any past due invoices, but I want to show you how this query can retrieve results from your ERP database. So I'm going to say, just for demo purposes here, my invoice due date is not less than the current date, so it's not overdue. And let's take a look and see if we can find any matching results. So we're going to look once again at any invoices that are, in this case, coming due, have a balance greater than $100, and let's see what results we get. I should have a few invoices out here that meet these criteria. And there they are. So you can see this is information being directly drawn from your Sage 100 database, or in this case, my Sage 100 database. All of the fields of data that I want alerts and workflow to retrieve from my ERP database are here for me to confirm that that's what I want. So that's the trigger of this particular event. And then we move on from the trigger to the event's deliverables. This is the part of an event that answers the question, what do I want this event to do? Well, there's a lot to choose from. In fact, there are 10 options in terms of an event's actions or deliverables, and we divide them into 3 categories that you can see over on the right. First of all, do you have any standard forms or documents that you want to send as part of an alert? That could be, for example, a chart. And in fact, this event has a chart. This event, and we'll have a look at it a little bit later, is generating a chart that totals our open invoices by sales rep. Does this event have a form or a report? Once again, the answer is yes. This event actually is using my standard invoice form, and we can click on it to get a little bit more details here. to actually automatically regenerate the overdue invoice. Here I've specified in PDF format, alerts and workflow, automatically passing in the appropriate invoice number so that that form can be generated and delivered accordingly. Let's go back to our list of deliverables. The methods by which this information can be delivered, there's three: email, SMS or text message to a mobile or cell phone, and then a delivery method unique to alerts and workflow called webcasting. Now, it's true that most people today still get their alerts via either email or text, but webcasting is kind of cool. And let me tell you the thinking behind webcasting. The thinking here is that some people, especially within an office, they want a web page up that says, here's the current situation of invoices, or here's my stock that needs reordering. Here are all the purchase orders that need to be reviewed and approved. A webcast is a dynamic web page automatically updated with the details of any business conditions that you and your colleagues are interested in. So it's kind of, in a way, a little bit like email, except that it's a web page that's dynamically updated. I've seen this used in accounting departments where people will have up a web page that says, here's a list of all the invoices coming due this week. I've seen this also used down in a shipping department where someone in a warehouse will have a webcast page up that says, here's a list of all of the orders that need to go out today. And then the final type of deliverable are the actions. And the actions, to me, are what really define the workflow part of Sage Alerts and Workflow. Because if you think about it, everything that we've discussed thus far has to do with Sage Alerts and Workflow generating some kind of communications. It could be a form, an invoice, it could be a chart, it could be an email or a text message, and delivering it to the appropriate people. But what if a customer has an overdue invoice and I want to put that customer on credit hold? I want to change their payment terms. It's actually these actions that allow us to go back into an application like Sage 100, Sugar CRM, or elsewhere, and actually add or update information. And so what we've done with this action group, and you'll notice it has the most entries in it, these are all different methods that you can use to update information in an application, to write data out even to a website. So there are a number of different tool sets that are included in this action box, such as the ability to execute programs, run SQL insert or update statements, but I wanted to spend a moment to focus on the most powerful of these actions, a REST web API. So you've probably heard of web services. The most common, by an exponential factor, type of web service that organizations and software applications use is called the REST, sometimes referred to as a RESTful API. And it is an application programming interface that allows you to write data out to various applications, both locally and hosted, to update information on websites, etc. And we've embedded this REST web API within our current and latest version of Sage Alerts and Workflow. That's a new edition in version 10. Okay, so those are all the deliverables that can be chosen from. You can see here this event has a number of deliverables generating a chart. It's actually exporting data to a file. Maybe we're working with a collections agency and they've asked us at the end of every week to send them a CSV of all overdue invoices. We've talked about generating an invoice. Let's talk for a moment about the email that Alerts and Workflow generates. Now, emails can be designed to be in plain text, but between you and me, that's a little boring. That's a little old school. And so we've embedded a nice, easy wizard for generating good-looking HTML formatted emails. So in this case, one of the most common requests is, I just want to generate an email that contains a table. In this case, a table listing all of my invoices that are overdue. I want my headings to look like this. I want the corresponding fields to be beneath them like so. So again, with Alerts and Workflow, making it easy for you to configure events, and in this case, design outgoing alert messages to appear exactly as you want them without you having to know any kind of syntax You can see from this preceding window, we do actually show the HTML syntax that needs to be executed, but the good news here is you don't have to know how to write that because of the wizard-driven HTML editor. And let's just scroll down and see what else this event is doing. It's actually using the REST Web API to post some content to the Slack web channel. We are also having this event to generate output to that web dashboard. But let's finish up with the fifth and final component of an event is its subscribers, the people who are going to be recipients of the content, of the alerts, of the invoice, of the chart that's being generated. Now, there are two different types of subscribers for an event, standard and advanced. Standard are when you know the names of the people or the groups whom you wish to notify. In this case, I'm notifying myself and also the finance group. I've chosen to notify myself via 3 different delivery methods: email, copy, which is FTP or SFTP for secure FTP, as well as web dashboard. My finance group I've chosen to notify via just 2 of those methods. But let's think back to the purpose of this event: invoices that are overdue for payment. And when you think about it, there are really 2 most important people whom you want to notify. And those people are the customer and their sales rep. And so the advanced subscribers allow you to specify or allow you to tell alerts and workflow that in this case, we also want an alert to be sent to the customer who has the overdue invoice, and you want to carbon copy the salesperson who's responsible for that customer's account. So again, giving you the ability to notify certain standard folks, my CFO, my sales manager, etc., but also notify people who are related to or associated with the event that's being triggered. Okay. So you've seen now the components of an event and how you'd go about configuring it. Before we leave the alerts and workflow application, I just want to take you very briefly to the monitor module. Because alerts and workflow is doing all of this stuff in the background. It's monitoring your ERP data, it's triggering alerts, it's generating reports, it's notifying lots of people. Well, how do you know what it's doing? How do you know whether or not those actions, those alerts have been successful? Well, right within the alerts and workflow browser interface is the monitor that lets you keep an eye on everything that alerts and workflow has done. So I don't need to save my changes to that last event. So we'll just say no. We can cancel out of here. Yes, I do wish to proceed. Always helps to read the little informational messages there. So now let's jump over and look at our application events. Okay. So earlier today, I actually ran an event that looked at invoices that were coming due within 30 days. Here we can see that this event was checked. I can see when it ran. I can see, in fact, even the amount of system resources that took to run this event. And I think that's an important consideration, because if organizations use this application to monitor conditions across their organization, not just in their Sage ERP app, you need to know how much time, how much in terms of system resources. Sage Alerts and Workflow is highly, highly optimized to run in the most efficient manner possible. This event took a grand total of all of its actions of just 7 seconds of processor time. We can also look and see if this event's conditions were met, and if so, by what invoices. We can click over on Triggered. If we want to get a little bit more details, let's see what the actual alert message looks like. So here we can see 2 alerts were delivered. They were both delivered to me, but I'd like to point out, notice 2 different email addresses. I have both a primary and secondary email address defined within Alerts and Workflow. That way, regardless of whether I check my work email or my personal email, the information is there. Let's have ourselves a brief look at that alert message. There it is. But now that we've seen it here, let's actually go into my email client. I'm going to jump into my email and actually show you the actual alert itself that was delivered to me and to my Gmail account. So there were 6 matching records, 6 invoices that are coming due. I actually have one example, I think, of an invoice that 2 of them that are coming due, in fact, tomorrow. And then, as you might recall, we said that we have the ability to attach charts, graphs, documents like invoices and statements. In this particular case, I just wanted to get a sense for all of the open invoices that I have. How are they distributed, among my sales staff? And so I can see that the vast majority of them are split between 2 sales reps. Now, things like charts and graphs and even invoices, as in this case, they can be attached to an outgoing email, or Alerts and Workflow gives you the choice to have those documents embedded right within the body of an outgoing email itself, which is increasingly important as it gets sometimes more difficult to send people emails with attachments. Okay, so let me just jump right back into this PowerPoint. I think I'm just about at the end, but let's confirm that with one final slide. And you heard me mention this earlier. From the lists of events that I've shared with you, even just the top 10 list, looking at invoices that are overdue, stock approaching its reorder level, customers who have stopped buying or changed their buying habits, orders that are missing components. In the last 40 or so minutes, if you are able to see just 2 items in all the scenarios that I've presented to you, just 2 of those, you thought to yourself, you know something, those could help our business. Those could free up some of our staff's time if we were to automate those processes. Well, all it takes is just 2 tasks, because that's going to save you a minimum of 10 minutes of human time every day. And you multiply that human time up, and what you've got is a decent amount of human capital that you've increased without increasing your workforce, that you can put towards activities that will grow your organization. And that's really what this is all about. Taking your existing staff, looking at the tasks that they're performing today manually, identifying those tasks that can be automated through Sage Alerts and Workflow, automating them, and freeing up that human time for tasks that uniquely require the involvement of a human being and human interaction. And that typically focuses on tasks that grow your business or improve your ability to provide a high level of satisfaction to your customers. So I think I'm just about at that 40 to 45 minute limit. So Jesse, let me turn things back over to you, see if we have any questions that I can answer.
Thanks, Don. That was great. I did collect about 4 questions actually throughout the presentation. So I will just start from the top. Does Alerts and Workflow have the ability to tell me if an alert fails to reach its intended recipient?
That's a great question. Let me first give the short form answer, which is yes, it does. And in fact, I gave you a peek into it when we jumped into the monitor component of Alerts and Workflow. So we looked at events that were checked and triggered. We could have looked a little bit further, because Alerts and Workflow tracks every action that it takes. So whether it's the delivery of an email, in this case to myself, the one that we looked at, the delivery of a text message to a staff member, the generation of an invoice or statement, all of those actions are tracked in terms of their success or potential failure. An email gateway might be down. We might have an invalid address to send to someone's mobile device. So the answer is yes, Alerts and Workflow can not only track whether a delivery has been successful, but you can actually, within Alerts and Workflow, configure what we call alert failover mode. So you can say to Alerts and Workflow, if this alert has failed to reach its intended recipient, maybe within 5, 10, or 15 minutes of its intended delivery, you can actually have Alerts and Workflow fail over that alert to an alternate or secondary recipient.
Okay, got it. Next question. Are there free trials of Alerts and Workflow? Can someone try it before they purchase?
Absolutely, and we encourage it. We encourage it most strongly because, as my wife often likes to say about this technology, because I've shared it with her, she says, Don, it's the just hold a puppy syndrome. Once you set it up internally and even turn it on for just a couple of events, overdue invoices, low stock, a purchase order that's awaiting approval, you see the value, and then your creative juices start flowing. So you can download and install Sage Alerts and Workflow today. The application automatically comes with a full function 30-day trial license. So once you start using Alerts and Workflow, you can try out different scenarios. All of those event packs and those pre-configured events that I mentioned, 85 or so for Sage 100, come with that trial. So that's a very enthusiastic yes. You can try it. Make sure it meets your criteria before you reach a decision whether to purchase.
Okay, great. And then another question, what technical expertise do I need to use the REST Web Service API?
An excellent question, because that is brand new in version 10 of Sage Alerts and Workflow. So I'm going to answer it and then give you access to some additional resources. You need to be familiar in general with how REST APIs work, but from a syntactical perspective, specifically what you need to be familiar with is what's called JSON, and that's JSON. That's the actual syntax that is used by the Alerts and Workflow REST Web API. So if you're familiar with JSON syntax, or you have access to someone who has that familiarity, that's really what you require to use that REST Web API. And there are a bunch of great educational tools out on the web. If you'd like links to some of them, I'd be more than happy to provide. There's also a brand new chapter in the Alerts and Workflow version 10 manual on the REST API. It talks about various functions that you can perform. And as you can see, even in my demo, we provide samples of REST API calls so that you can look and see how they're formatted.
Wonderful. We have one last final question. Does Alerts and Workflow come with any pre-configured events for my Sage ERP system?
Right. Yes, that's a very definitive answer. So yes. First of all, if you're using Sage 100, about 85 to 90 pre-configured events. Sage 300, about 65 to 70. Here's the really short answer. There are collections of pre-configured events for every Sage application out there. So whether it's Sage 100, 300, 500, X3, Sage CRM, Sage HRMS, and the list continues. But that totals to about 15 to 20 applications. Then there are about 60 to 65 additional event packs that we offer for free for use with other applications. So Jesse, you mentioned Sugar CRM. There's an event pack for that application. Just mentioning off the top of my head, there are a bunch of Microsoft Dynamics event packs. So yeah, there are a bunch of them. And in fact, when you go to the alertsandworkflow.com website, and that's that whole word spelled out, actually there are three words, alertsandworkflow.com. From there, you can actually download the software. You can download the event packs, any of them. And you can also access lists of the pre-configured events that come with the Sage application. So if you are a Sage 100 customer, as an example, you've now heard me say about 85 to 90 pre-configured events, but you're probably thinking, well, I wonder what those events do. If you go to alertsandworkflow.com, you'll see a tab titled By Sage Product. That's BY Sage Product. Click on that. You'll get a listing of the main Sage apps. And if you're a Sage 100 customer, click on Sage 100. You'll see a link to the list of pre-configured events. So the full answer to that question is yes, these collections are available. They are free, and you can see what they are by going to alertsandworkflow.com.
Fantastic. Thanks, Don. That concludes the questions that we had for today. So again, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to present to our clients today, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending as well. I will process this webinar and send out a recording so everyone has access to it and can share it with your team. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I will address those, and I can pull other expertise. So thanks again, Don. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Jesse. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.